I'm Johnny, 32, an accountant from Boston who spent my entire life as the family mediator. Growing up as the middle child between my domineering father and rebellious siblings taught me to maintain peace at any cost. When Dad's message appeared in our family chat saying, "Stay away from us forever," it felt like a knife to my chest. What he didn't realize was that the financial strings connecting us gave me unexpected leverage I'd never used before. Before I tell you how my family imploded, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members. Let me properly introduce you to the cast of characters in this family drama. My father, Richard, built his identity around being a successful businessman who controlled every aspect of our lives, especially finances. He treated our family like one of his companies, micromanaging decisions, demanding loyalty, and obsessing over appearances. The neighborhood saw us as the picture-perfect American family, but behind closed doors, Dad ruled with an iron fist disguised as parental concern. My mother, Karen, mastered the art of silent compliance over 30 years of marriage. She's a gentle woman who genuinely loves her children, but her dedication to keeping the peace meant she always sided with my father when conflicts arose. I can count on one hand the times I've heard her openly disagree with him. Her favorite phrase growing up was, "Just do what your father says and everything will be fine." She meant well, but didn't realize she was teaching us to suppress our authentic selves to avoid rocking the boat. Then there's my older sister, Stephanie, the golden child. 3 years older than me, she followed Dad's life script to the letter business degree from his alma mater, corporate job he approved of, marriage to a man from a good family. Dad beamed with pride at her every accomplishment, which were really accomplishments he'd engineered. Looking back, I see how Stephanie traded her identity for his approval, something I never fully understood until recently. My younger brother, Ethan, is what family therapists call the identified patient, the designated black sheep. He's 5 years younger than me and showed artistic talent from childhood, something Dad considered useless. Artists starve. Businessmen thrive was Dad's mantra whenever Ethan showed him a drawing. Despite the constant disapproval, Ethan pursued his passion, resulting in explosive arguments throughout his teens and 20s. Every family gathering became a battlefield, with Ethan's life choices the primary target. And then there's me, Johnny, the middle child. I became the family mediator, the peacekeeper, the emotional support beam preventing our family structure from collapsing. I learned to read the room, diffuse tensions, and translate between my father's harsh expectations and my siblings' emotional needs. I followed enough of Dad's advice to earn his partial approval, becoming an accountant rather than joining his business while secretly supporting Ethan's artistic endeavors. I was everyone's confidant, but never fully aligned with anyone. My career choice turned out to be pivotal in this story. While Dad respected accounting as a sensible profession, he considered it less prestigious than his real estate development company. What he did respect was my financial stability. By 30, I had established myself at a reputable firm, built excellent credit, maintained a healthy savings account, and purchased a modest but nice condo in a good Boston neighborhood. Dad couldn't criticize my financial decisions, though he frequently suggested better ways I could be investing my money. This financial stability eventually created the entanglements that would later give me unexpected leverage. It started 3 years ago when Stephanie and her husband wanted to buy their first home. The market was competitive, and they needed a larger down payment to secure their dream house. Dad suggested I co-sign for a loan of $180,000, framing it as helping your sister and a smart investment in family. Being the good brother and son, I agreed. 6 months later, Dad approached me about co-signing for a $45,000 business expansion loan. His credit was tied up in other investments, and my name would just be a formality since he would make all the payments. Again, I agreed, wanting to maintain my image as the helpful, reliable son. Last year, when Mom needed some expensive dental work and medical procedures not fully covered by insurance, I co-signed for another $25,000 in medical loans. The pattern was clear. I had become the family bank, while still being treated as just the middle child in every other respect. Despite my financial contributions, family dynamics remained unchanged. At gatherings, Dad dominated conversations about business and investments. Mom managed food and comfort. Stephanie showcased her picture-perfect life. Ethan remained the target of Dad's disapproval, and I played peacekeeper while everyone took my stability for granted. Things began to change when Ethan, now 27, finally gained traction in his art career. After years of struggle, small gigs, and side jobs to support his passion, he developed a unique style blending traditional painting techniques with digital elements. His work began getting attention in local art circles, which I celebrated but kept somewhat quiet around Dad. As Ethan's success grew, so did Dad's criticism. It wasn't enough that Ethan could pay his bills through art. Dad wanted him in a real career with a real future. Mom would nervously change the subject whenever Ethan's art came up. Stephanie would make backhanded comments like, "Well, at least it's keeping you busy until you figure things out." I continued defending Ethan but found myself increasingly frustrated with the family's inability to recognize his legitimate talent and determination. Family gatherings became increasingly tense. Sunday dinners at my parents' suburban home transformed from obligatory traditions to emotional minefields. Dad would interrogate each of us about our careers, finances, and life choices, offering unsolicited advice that felt more like commands. Mom would flutter around refilling drinks and urging everyone to try more food, her way of diffusing tensions without addressing them. Stephanie would showcase her latest achievements, receiving Dad's approving nods, while Ethan would either stay silent or engage in verbal sparring matches with Dad that ended with one of them storming out. Throughout all this, I maintained my role as mediator, but something was shifting inside me. Years of therapy, which I never mentioned to my family, had helped me recognize the unhealthy patterns in our dynamic. I was becoming increasingly aware of how my financial entanglements with my family had created a power imbalance that benefited everyone but me. I was expected to help without question but wasn't granted a voice in family matters commensurate with my contributions. Still, old habits die hard. Despite my growing dissatisfaction, I continued playing my assigned role, convinced that maintaining family harmony was worth the personal cost. I had no idea that everything would soon come crashing down, forcing me to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what was right. The catalyst for our family implosion came when Ethan secured his first major art exhibition at a respected gallery in Boston's art district. After years of rejection and struggle, this represented a significant milestone in his career, a legitimate step toward the professional success our father claimed he'd never achieve. When Ethan called to tell me the news, the excitement in his voice was palpable. "Johnny, can you believe it? A solo exhibition. The curator said my work shows remarkable technical skill and emotional depth." His voice cracked slightly. "This is actually happening, man." I felt a surge of pride for my little brother. "That's incredible, Ethan. I knew you could do it. When's the opening?" 3 weeks from Friday. Will you come? "I'm sending formal invitations, but I wanted to ask you personally." "Are you kidding?" Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I promised, already blocking the date on my calendar. The conversation turned serious when Ethan asked, "Do you think Mom and Dad will come?" I hesitated. Our father had never attended any of Ethan's smaller shows, dismissing them as hobby displays. But this was different, a legitimate exhibition that even Dad would have trouble diminishing. "I'll talk to them," I assured him. "This is too important for them to miss." My optimism was quickly crushed when I broached the subject during Sunday dinner the following weekend. Dad's response was immediate and dismissive. "An art show? That's what you're interrupting dinner to discuss?" He shook his head, cutting into his steak with unnecessary force. "I've got actual business meetings that night." "You don't even know what night it is, Richard," Mom pointed out gently. Dad waved his fork. "Doesn't matter. My evenings are booked with people doing real work, not playing with paintbrushes." I saw Stephanie shift uncomfortably in her seat, while Mom's eyes dropped to her plate. The familiar tension descended over the dining room, but this time, something felt different inside me. A slow burn of anger replaced my usual diplomatic instinct. "This isn't some coffee shop hanging his sketches, Dad. It's a juried exhibition at the Hamilton Gallery. Critics and collectors will be there. This is exactly the kind of professional success you've been demanding from him." Dad scoffed. "Professional success means financial security and respect, not hanging pictures on a wall for people to gawk at." "That's exactly what it means in the art world," I countered, maintaining a calm tone despite my rising frustration. "This could lead to commissions, sales, and future exhibitions." "It's business, just in a field you don't understand." Dad's face reddened. He hated being told there was something he didn't understand. Mom quickly jumped in with offers of dessert, but I wasn't backing down this time. "Mom, Stephanie, Ethan really wants you both there. This matters to him. I looked directly at them, ignoring Dad's glare. Will you come? After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Mom nodded hesitantly. I'll be there, of course. Stephanie glanced at Dad before answering. I suppose I could stop by for a little while. Dad pushed his chair back from the table with enough force to make the silverware rattle. Do what you want. I've given up expecting this family to prioritize appropriately. The night of Ethan's exhibition arrived, and the gallery was impressively crowded. Professional lighting highlighted Ethan's work, a series exploring human connection in digital landscapes, each piece showcasing his technical skill and unique perspective. Seeing my brother in his element, confidently discussing his artistic process with interested patrons, filled me with pride. Mom arrived looking nervous but dressed elegantly. She hugged Ethan tightly, whispering something in his ear that made him smile genuinely. Stephanie arrived 30 minutes later, glancing at her watch repeatedly and keeping to the periphery of the room. Still, they had both come, and their presence clearly meant the world to Ethan. The evening reached its peak when Eleanor Whitman, owner of several prestigious galleries across New England, engaged Ethan in an extended conversation about his techniques and vision. I overheard phrases like fresh perspective and interested in your next series. Ethan's face glowed with the validation he'd sought for years. During a quiet moment, Ethan thanked the three of us for coming, his voice thick with emotion. It means everything having my family here tonight. The unspoken absence hung heavily between us. Shortly after Ethan's speech, Mom's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression falling. I should probably head home soon, she said apologetically. Minutes later, Stephanie received a text that prompted the same reaction. I've got an early morning tomorrow, she explained, already gathering her purse. I didn't need to ask who had messaged them. By 9:30, both Mom and Stephanie had left, missing the gallery owner's announcement that she was acquiring 2 of Ethan's pieces for her permanent collection, the kind of professional achievement Dad had always said would never happen. The drive home that night, I received 6 calls from my father, which I initially ignored. When I finally answered, his voice boomed through my car speakers. You deliberately undermined me tonight. You knew I didn't want them at that ridiculous display, but you manipulated your mother and sister anyway. It was Ethan's night, Dad. A professional milestone that deserves family support. Professional? He spat the word. Playing with paints isn't a profession. It's a childish fantasy you've been enabling for years. A gallery owner bought 2 pieces for her permanent collection tonight, I replied evenly. That's not fantasy, that's professional recognition and actual income. Don't lecture me about income or recognition, he snapped. I built a multi-million-dollar business while you and your brother play at your little jobs. The dismissal of my own career stung unexpectedly. My little job seems important enough when you need a loan cosigner, I said before I could stop myself. A heavy silence followed before Dad responded with cold precision. I see where your loyalties lie now. You've made your choice. The call ended abruptly. For 2 days, an uncomfortable silence descended. No family texts, no calls, no emails. I reached out to Mom and received brief, non-committal responses. Ethan reported the same radio silence, while Stephanie didn't respond at all. The silence was unusual even by our family's dysfunctional standards. Then, on the 3rd morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from our family group chat, a thread normally used for coordinating dinners or sharing bland family news. Dad had never been particularly active in it, preferring direct calls when he wanted something. The message appeared under his name. After careful consideration, your mother and I have chosen to sever all contact with those who disrespect our family values. Stay away from us forever. I stared at the screen in disbelief, waiting for a follow-up or clarification that never came. Instead, a notification appeared showing Stephanie had liked the message. Seconds later, Ethan responded with a series of question marks, then went silent. I tried calling Dad immediately straight to voicemail. Mom's phone rang but went unanswered. Stephanie's assistant at her office informed me she was in meetings all day. The family had gone into lockdown mode, with Ethan and me on the outside. When I finally reached Ethan by phone, his voice sounded hollow. So this is it? 27 years as their son. And it ends with a text message, because I dared to be successful in a field Dad doesn't approve of. I had no answers for him. For the first time in my life, I couldn't find the diplomatic words to smooth over this family fracture. Something fundamental had broken, and I wasn't sure it could or should be repaired. The hours following Dad's message were a blur of disbelief and pain. I sat in my condo staring at those words, "Stay away from us," forever trying to process how 3 decades of family bonds could be severed through a text message. Every attempt to reach my parents or Stephanie failed, increasing my sense of helpless rage. Memories flooded back unbidden: Dad teaching me to ride a bike, Mom nursing me through childhood illnesses, family vacations where we actually seemed happy. Had those moments been real, or just performances for a family portrait that existed only in my father's mind? I'd spent my entire life smoothing family conflicts. When Dad berated Ethan for getting B's instead of A's, I'd distract him with questions about business. When Stephanie and Mom argued over wedding plans, I mediated compromise. When Ethan threatened to cut contact with Dad during college, I convinced him to maintain minimal communication for Mom's sake. My identity had been built around being the family glue, and now the entire structure had collapsed, despite my efforts. As night fell, I poured a glass of whiskey and began reviewing financial documents, a professional habit that helped me think clearly during emotional turmoil. The papers told a story beyond family drama, a web of financial entanglements that suddenly appeared in a new light. Dad's business expansion loan that I'd co-signed wasn't just for a formality, as he'd claimed my excellent credit score had secured a significantly lower interest rate than he could have qualified for alone, saving him thousands of dollars annually. Stephanie's housing loan had allowed her to purchase in an exclusive neighborhood that impressed Dad's business associates. Mom's medical loans had covered procedures at prestigious facilities Dad had insisted on rather than equally qualified providers within their insurance network. The next morning I called my friend Marcus, a financial advisor I trusted implicitly. "Legally, what happens if I remove myself as co-signer on these loans?" I asked after explaining the situation. "It depends on the loan terms," Marcus replied cautiously. "For most of these, the primary borrowers would need to refinance immediately or face default. Their rates would likely increase substantially given current market conditions. But Johnny," he added, concern evident in his voice, "using financial leverage against family is entering dangerous territory." "I'm not planning anything yet," I assured him, "just understanding my position." But as the day progressed with continued silence from my family, I began contemplating exactly that. For years, I'd wielded considerable financial power without ever using it, while Dad maintained control through emotional manipulation. The imbalance suddenly seemed glaring. That evening, Ethan came over, his eyes red from lack of sleep. We ordered pizza and talked late into the night about our childhood, our parents, and the invisible chains that had bound us to Dad's expectations. "You know what kills me?" Ethan said, staring into his beer. "All I ever wanted was for him to say 'good job' just once without adding a 'but you could have' afterward. I didn't even need him to like my art just to acknowledge I was good at it." I nodded, understanding completely. I became an accountant partly because it was close enough to business to earn his partial approval. Sometimes I wonder what I'd have done if I'd chosen entirely for myself. "So what do we do now?" Ethan asked, his voice smaller than his 27 years. "Just accept being disowned over an art exhibition." I hesitated, conflicting loyalties warring within me. "I don't know yet. But I'm done being the family peacekeeper at the expense of what's right." After Ethan left, I spent hours researching the implications of removing myself from family loans. I spoke with my bank and consulted the original loan documents. The picture became increasingly clear. Without my financial backing, my father and sister would face significant difficulties, possibly even financial hardship depending on their current situations. The ethical dilemma kept me awake well into the night. Using financial pressure felt manipulative, exactly what I resented in my father. Yet continuing as the family bank while being emotionally discarded seemed equally wrong. Where was the line between standing up for myself and becoming what I despised? The turning point came the following afternoon when I was organizing old emails and found a thread between Dad and Stephanie from 3 years ago that had accidentally included my address. The subject line caught my attention: Johnny's financial reliability. The messages discussed me as an asset rather than a son or brother. Dad wrote, "Johnny's credit score makes him the perfect co-signer. He's always been eager to please, so approach him about the house loan before he starts questioning these arrangements." Stephanie responded, "He'll do it if I frame it as helping family. He hates disappointing people, especially you." The calculated manipulation hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been signing loans out of familial love and duty, they'd been strategically exploiting my desire for approval and conflict avoidance. When I called Ethan to tell him about the emails, he was quiet for a moment before saying, "Dad called me yesterday." "What? What did he say?" "Nothing about reconciliation. He spent 15 minutes telling me my art career was a disappointment and that I'd ruined family harmony by dragging Mom and Stephanie to my exhibition." Then he hung up before I could respond. Something crystallized in that moment, a clarity I'd never experienced before. This wasn't about Ethan's exhibition, or my support of it. This was about control. Dad had issued his ultimatum expecting Ethan to beg forgiveness and me to mediate as usual, restoring the power dynamic he preferred. When neither happened, he'd moved to isolate us from the rest of the family. For the first time, I saw our family system with perfect clarity and my role in enabling it. By always mediating, always compromising, always signing those loans, I'd helped maintain a toxic pattern that hurt everyone, especially Ethan. The decision crystallized not as revenge, but as necessary boundary setting. If Dad wanted to sever contact over Ethan's success and my support of it, he would have to face the full implications of cutting ties with me, including the financial ones. With newfound clarity about the manipulation I'd endured, I crafted a response designed not for drama, but for directness. At exactly noon, I sent a single line to the family group chat. "I'll remove my name from every loan tomorrow." 7 simple words that acknowledged the financial reality my father had conveniently ignored when issuing his ultimatum. I set my phone aside and returned to work, knowing what would follow. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications. Dad called 6 times in succession, leaving progressively angrier voicemails. Stephanie texted privately, "How dare you threaten the family financially when Dad is just trying to maintain standards? Stop being so dramatic and fix this." Mom sent a single text, "Please call me Johnny." I noted she hadn't reached out until money was involved. I maintained radio silence, a strategy I'd learned from watching my father over the years. By mid-afternoon, Dad escalated to threats, his final voicemail stating, "If you go through with this, you're destroying this family. Is that what you want? To destroy everything I've built?" The irony wasn't lost on me. He had issued the stay away forever ultimatum, but I was the one destroying the family by responding with my own boundaries. Stephanie's approach shifted from attacking to recruiting allies. By evening, I'd received calls from 2 uncles, an aunt, and even my father's business partner, all urging me to be reasonable and think of your parents. None mentioned Dad's original message or questioned why he had tried to cut contact with his sons. I maintained my resolve, consulting with my bank about the process for removing myself from the loans. The banker's expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes widened slightly when I explained I wanted to detach from over $250,000 in family loan obligations. "It's not a simple process, Mr. Williams," he explained. "The primary loan holders would need to refinance or find another co-signer. There would be fees, potentially higher interest rates, and credit implications for all parties." "I understand," I replied, scheduling a formal appointment for the following week. "Please prepare the necessary paperwork." I also consulted with a lawyer friend who specialized in family law, explaining the situation and asking about potential repercussions. "Document everything," she advised. "Save the group chat messages, voicemails, emails, anything showing the sequence of events. If they try to claim you misled them about remaining as cosigner, you'll need evidence of why you're withdrawing." Ethan stayed at my place that evening, both for moral support and because he feared confronting Dad alone. We ordered takeout, reviewed my financial documentation, and discussed potential outcomes. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked. "Once you pull financial support, there's no going back to how things were." "I don't want to go back to how things were," I replied with certainty I hadn't felt in years. "Dad wants unconditional authority without accepting that relationships, even family ones, have to be reciprocal." We spent hours talking through scenarios and crafting responses for various potential reactions. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix the family situation. I was establishing boundaries regardless of whether reconciliation followed. Around midnight, as predicted, the family group chat exploded. Dad broke his silence with an all-caps tirade. "You have no right to threaten this family financially. I have given you everything, and this is how you repay me. By threatening your mother's medical care and your sister's home. Is this the son I raised? Stephanie followed immediately. Johnny, this is insane. You know we can't refinance in this market. Are you trying to make us lose the house just because Dad hurt your feelings? What is wrong with you? Even Mom, usually the peacemaker, joined in. Johnny, please don't do this. Whatever problems we're having, we can work them out as a family. Your father didn't mean forever. He was just upset. Please be reasonable. I read each message aloud to Ethan, noting the manipulation tactics Dad's attempt to flip the narrative, making me the villain for responding to his ultimatum. Stephanie's minimization of the issue as hurt feelings, Mom's classic enabling, excusing Dad's behavior while placing responsibility for resolution on me. They haven't mentioned my exhibition once, Ethan observed. It's like the original issue doesn't even matter now that money's involved. He was right. Not one message acknowledged why Dad had tried to cut contact in the first place. The financial threat had completely overshadowed the original conflict, revealing what truly mattered to them. As the messages continued pouring in, I drafted a calm, measured response, running it by Ethan before sending. I'm respecting Dad's decision to sever all contact with those who disrespect family values. Since supporting Ethan's professional success apparently constitutes disrespect, I'm simply ensuring all ties are properly severed, including financial ones. If you'd like to discuss revising that decision, I'm open to a conversation about mutual respect going forward. The response was met with momentary silence, then a direct message from Dad. We need to meet, tomorrow, our house, 5 p.m. I countered, neutral location only. I suggest Marino's restaurant at 7. I'll reserve a private room. After some back and forth, with Dad attempting to maintain home field advantage and me holding firm, he finally agreed to the restaurant meeting. I felt a strange sense of calm as I prepared for bed that night. Not happiness, certainly, but the quiet certainty that comes from finally standing in your truth. Whatever happens tomorrow, I told Ethan as he made up the sofa bed, we're done letting Dad dictate our worth based on his narrow definition of success. Ethan nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Took us long enough, didn't it? Better late than never, little brother, I replied, feeling like we were finally acting like the adults Dad had always demanded we become, just not in the way he'd intended. The private dining room at Marino's restaurant felt like neutral territory for the impending family summit. I'd chosen it carefully upscale enough to satisfy Dad's status concerns, but public enough to discourage shouting. Ethan and I arrived 20 minutes early, ordering waters and reviewing our approach one final time. Remember, this isn't about punishment, I reminded him. It's about establishing healthy boundaries going forward. Ethan nodded, fidgeting with his napkin. Do you think they'll actually listen? Before I could answer, the door opened, and our family filed in. Dad entered first, his imposing figure clad in his power suit despite the evening hour. His face was locked in the stern expression he used for difficult business negotiations. Mom followed, looking smaller than usual, her eyes darting nervously between family members. Stephanie came last, her professional facade showing cracks of uncertainty. No one moved to hug or even shake hands. We took our seats in awkward silence until the server arrived to take drink orders. Dad ordered scotch, Mom a glass of white wine, Stephanie a gin and tonic. Ethan and I stuck with water, needing clear heads. Once the server departed, Dad leaned forward, hands clasped on the table in his classic negotiation posture. This family dispute has gone far enough, he began, as though addressing subordinates. Your threat to withdraw financial support is completely disproportionate to the situation. I noticed immediately how he framed the narrative. My response was a threat, while his stay away forever ultimatum wasn't mentioned at all. Let's be clear about the sequence of events, I replied calmly. You publicly demanded Ethan and I stay away forever because we didn't comply with your wishes regarding his art exhibition. You stated you were severing all contact. I'm simply ensuring that severance is complete, including financial entanglements. Dad's jaw tightened. Don't twist my words. That message was written in the heat of the moment, which you never apologized for or retracted, Ethan interjected, his voice steady despite his obvious tension. I shouldn't have to apologize for expecting respect from my sons, Dad countered, voice rising slightly. And I certainly don't need to apologize for expecting financial commitments to be honored. This was the opening I'd anticipated. Financial commitments work both ways, Dad. When you told us to stay away forever, you ended the relationship that those commitments were based on. You can't demand financial support from people you've disowned. Stephanie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Johnny, you know we can't refinance right now. Mortgage rates have nearly doubled since we bought the house. We could lose everything. I turned to her, maintaining a neutral expression. I'm curious, Stephanie, when Dad told Ethan and me to stay away forever, and you liked that message, did you consider what that would mean for your housing situation? Or did you assume I'd continue providing financial support to people who want nothing to do with me? She flushed, glancing at Dad before responding. It wasn't like that. I thought we were just taking a family break to cool down. A break doesn't involve the words, stay away forever, Ethan noted quietly. Mom, who had been silently crying, looked up. Johnny, please. Your father was upset about the art show. He didn't mean to cut you off permanently. We're family, we can work through this. I felt the familiar pull to ease her distress, to take on the mediator role and smooth things over. But that pattern had brought us to this dysfunctional point. Mom, I've spent my entire life mediating family conflicts and making everyone comfortable at my own expense. But comfort isn't the same as health. This family dynamic is unhealthy, and I won't enable it anymore. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. Enough psychobabble. This is about obligations and respect. I built this family, provided for you all, and this is the thanks I get? Financial threats and ultimatums? That's an interesting perspective coming from the person who issued the original ultimatum, I observed, remaining calm despite my racing heart. The server returned with drinks and took our dinner orders, creating a brief intermission in the confrontation. When he left, I decided to address the elephant in the room directly. Dad, why did you tell us to stay away forever? What exactly did we do that was so terrible? He scoffed. You undermined my authority by encouraging that ridiculous art show attendance. You know I disapproved. My exhibition was a legitimate professional success, Ethan said. Eleanor Whitman bought 2 pieces for her permanent collection and is discussing representation. How is that ridiculous? And why does your disapproval automatically trump everyone else's judgment? I added. Mom and Stephanie are adults capable of deciding for themselves whether to attend an art exhibition. Dad's face reddened. This family functions because someone makes the hard decisions. I've spent 30 years building security for all of you, and I won't have it undermined by artistic whims and disrespect. The conversation was circling the same drain Dad's need for control, disguised as concern for the family. It was time to present my terms clearly. Here's where we stand, I said, making eye contact with each family member. I'm willing to maintain relationships with those who can respect boundaries and treat Ethan and me as adults with valid choices. That includes acknowledging Ethan's career as legitimate and valuable. I turned specifically to Dad. Financial manipulation goes both ways. I won't use money to control you, and I won't allow you to use emotional manipulation to control me. If you want me to remain involved in family finances, here are my conditions. I outlined 3 specific requirements. First, respect for all family members, including accepting Ethan's career choice without constant criticism. Second, clear financial boundaries, no more automatic expectation that I would co-sign loans or provide financial bailouts without discussion. Third, therapy individual counseling for Dad to address his controlling behaviors, and family sessions to rebuild healthier communication patterns. You have 2 weeks to decide, I concluded. I've scheduled a meeting with my bank for next Monday, but I'm willing to postpone it if we're making genuine progress toward these conditions. Dad's face had progressed from red to nearly purple. Therapy? You expect me to see some quack who'll blame everything on my parenting? Absolutely not. Then, you've made your choice, I replied, standing up. I'll proceed with removing my name from the loans. You can't just walk away from family, Mom pleaded, grabbing my arm. I'm not walking away, Mom. I'm setting conditions for staying. There's a difference. Dad stood abruptly, throwing his napkin onto the table. I won't be dictated to by my own son. When you come to your senses, you know where to find us. He stormed out without another word. Stephanie hesitated, looking torn between following Dad and continuing the conversation. After a moment, she stood. I hope you're happy tearing apart this family, she said, but her tone lacked conviction. She followed Dad out the door, glancing back briefly with an unreadable expression. Mom lingered, tears streaming down her face. Johnny, please reconsider. Your father is stubborn, but he loves you. We can work this out. Mom, I've spent my life working things out at my expense. I'm done with that. If Dad loves us, he can demonstrate it through actions, not control. The ball is in his court now. She squeezed my hand painfully tight before leaving, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As Ethan and I sat alone in the private dining room, the server returned with our untouched food. "Family problems?" he asked sympathetically. "You could say that," I replied, suddenly exhausted. "Should I box these up to go?" I nodded, realizing neither of us had any appetite left. On the drive home, Ethan finally broke our contemplative silence. "Do you think they'll come around?" I sighed, watching the city lights blur past. Honestly, I don't know. But for the first time, I feel like we did the right thing for ourselves, regardless of the outcome. The combination of terrible and relieved that washed over me felt like the beginning of something new, a family dynamic based on mutual respect rather than control, or no family relationship at all. Either way, I would no longer be the financial hostage to my father's emotional manipulation. The week following our restaurant confrontation passed in complete silence from my parents and Stephanie. I proceeded with my bank appointment, explaining the situation and reviewing the process for removing myself from the loans. I didn't immediately sign the final papers, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to honor the 2-week decision period I'd given my family. Ethan and I established a new routine, checking in with each other daily and providing mutual support. For the first time, our brotherhood felt balanced rather than me, always supporting him. We shared childhood memories, processed lingering resentments, and discussed hopes for healthier family relationships if possible. I also began seeing my therapist twice weekly, working through the complex emotions of setting boundaries with family, guilt over potentially causing financial hardship, grief for the relationships I'd thought we had, and anxiety about standing firm in my decision. These sessions helped me recognize that my father's controlling behavior and financial manipulation weren't normal or acceptable, regardless of family ties. Family obligations don't include sacrificing your autonomy or dignity, my therapist reminded me during a particularly difficult session. Healthy love doesn't demand compliance or use financial leverage for control. I took protective measures regardless of how the situation resolved, transferring investments to different accounts, changing passwords on financial platforms, and documenting all loan arrangements with meticulous attention to detail. If legal issues arose later, I'd be prepared. 10 days into the silence, my doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find my mother standing alone, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly, as though unsure of her welcome. I stepped aside, noting her nervous glances around my condo as though seeing it for the first time. Perhaps she was my parents, had visited rarely, always preferring I come to their house, where Dad controlled the environment. "Tea?" I offered, maintaining polite distance. She nodded gratefully, following me to the kitchen. After I'd prepared 2 cups, we settled in my living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she finally admitted, staring into her cup. "He'd be furious if he knew, and yet you came anyway," I observed. "That's new." She smiled sadly. "Maybe I'm learning from my son's courage." The compliment caught me off guard, creating an opening for genuine conversation. Mom began revealing things I'd never known. Dad's business was struggling more than he admitted, with cash flow problems that preceded my co-signing the expansion loan. Stephanie's marriage was showing strains under her husband's similar controlling behaviors, learned from Dad during years of mentorship. "I'm not here to ask you to change your mind," Mom said, surprising me again. "I'm here because I need advice on how to approach this situation with your father." "Not money?" I asked skeptically. "No, Johnny, not money." She set down her cup firmly. "I realize now how often we've approached you with financial needs while ignoring your emotional ones. I'm sorry for my part in that." The apology felt like a first crack in the family's dysfunctional facade. We spent 3 hours talking more honestly than we had in years, with Mom acknowledging Dad's controlling patterns and her enabling role in them. She hadn't come with easy solutions, but with a genuine desire to understand how we'd reached this breaking point. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "I don't know what happens next," she admitted, "but I'm glad we had this conversation." 2 days later, Dad called exactly 1 day before my deadline for removing myself from the loans. His greeting was stiff but lacked the hostile tone I'd expected. "Your mother thinks we should try therapy," he said without preamble. "I think it's nonsense, but I'm willing to attend one session to demonstrate my commitment to resolving this situation." It wasn't a wholehearted embrace of my conditions, but it represented more flexibility than Dad had shown in decades. We scheduled an appointment with a family therapist specialized in business families, framing it in terms Dad could accept as a business negotiation rather than emotional work. Stephanie reached out next via email, her message surprisingly vulnerable. "I never realized how much I've patterned my life after Dad's expectations, until this blew up," she wrote. I liked his message because I thought that's what daughters are supposed to do, support their fathers. But the thought of losing my house made me question everything. "I'm sorry, Johnny. I'm starting to understand what you and Ethan have felt all these years." The first family therapy session was predictably tense. Dad attempted to control the conversation. The therapist gently but firmly redirected, and Mom surprised everyone by speaking up when Dad interrupted Ethan's explanation of how criticism had affected his self-worth. "Richard, please let him finish," she said quietly but clearly. "We're here to listen." Dad's shocked expression would have been comical in another context. He fell silent, allowing Ethan to complete his thought. Perhaps the first time he'd listened to Ethan without interruption in years. Progress came in microscopic increments. Dad agreed to 3 individual therapy sessions, approaching them as executive coaching to save face. Stephanie began questioning her own choices, realizing how many had been made to please Dad rather than fulfill her own desires. Mom started expressing opinions more frequently, though still carefully. Family dynamics shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. Dad struggled to change ingrained behaviors, reverting to controlling tactics when stressed, but now other family members would name the behavior rather than accommodate it. Stephanie began talking about career changes she'd secretly considered for years but never pursued for fear of Dad's disapproval. Mom started a book club, her first independent social activity in years. The financial issues required practical solutions beyond emotional growth. After extensive discussion and financial planning, Dad refinanced his business loan without my involvement, accepting the higher interest rate as the cost of independence. Stephanie and her husband restructured their mortgage, selling some luxury items to compensate for less favorable terms. Mom's medical loans were the most challenging, but we developed a payment plan that distributed responsibility more equitably among family members. Throughout this resolution process, I maintained firm boundaries while remaining open to reconciliation. I declined 3 requests to co-sign new loans, but helped research alternative financing options. I attended family dinners but left when Dad's behavior became manipulative. I supported Ethan's burgeoning art career, attending his meetings with gallery representatives and helping negotiate contracts. Ethan experienced his own evolution during this period. With Eleanor Whitman's support, his work gained visibility in Boston's art scene, leading to commissioned pieces and teaching opportunities at a local art school. His confidence grew as he established financial independence through his art, the very outcome Dad had insisted was impossible. One particularly significant moment occurred during a family dinner 4 months after the initial confrontation. Dad, in a rare moment of vulnerability, acknowledged Ethan's success directly. "The commission piece for the Franklin Building lobby," he said hesitantly. "It's impressive. The design integrates well with the architecture." Coming from Dad, this qualified as effusive praise. Ethan met my eyes across the table, a mixture of shock and validation on his face. "Thanks, Dad," he replied simply, choosing to accept the compliment without qualification. The road to healthier family dynamics remained bumpy, with setbacks interspersed among small victories. Dad still struggled with controlling tendencies, Mom occasionally reverted to peacekeeping at all costs, and Stephanie sometimes prioritized Dad's approval over authenticity. But genuine communication had replaced superficial harmony, creating space for actual growth rather than perpetuating dysfunction. As for me, I was learning to exist in my family without automatically assuming the mediator role, to support without enabling, to love without sacrificing my boundaries. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was infinitely more authentic than the role I'd played for decades. 6 months after the group chat message that triggered our family implosion, we gathered for Thanksgiving dinner at my condo neutral territory by mutual agreement. The atmosphere felt different, not the forced harmony of our previous gatherings, but something more genuine, if occasionally awkward. Dad still dominated some conversations, but caught himself more quickly when others disengaged. Mom offered opinions more freely, especially about the upcoming holiday plans. Stephanie and her husband discussed their decision to downsize to a smaller home that better reflected their actual priorities rather than status concerns. Most notably, Ethan brought his portfolio of recent work, including images of his latest commission for a corporate headquarters, and everyone, including Dad, examined them with interest and asked substantive questions about his process. Our family dynamic had transformed in ways I'd never imagined possible. Dad would never be a warm, emotionally expressive father, but he had learned to moderate his controlling tendencies and occasionally acknowledge his son's different definitions of success. The therapy he'd initially dismissed as nonsense had given him tools for communication that didn't rely on dominance. He still struggled with vulnerability, but had begun recognizing when his business mindset inappropriately invaded family relationships. Mom had discovered her voice after decades of silence, starting with small disagreements and working up to meaningful boundary setting. She joined community organizations, developed friendships independent of Dad's business connections, and started expressing preferences rather than automatically deferring to others. Her relationship with Dad was evolving into something more balanced, though she acknowledged this transition wasn't always smooth. Stephanie had perhaps changed most dramatically, questioning her lifelong pattern of seeking Dad's approval above all else. She'd begun therapy to address how this pattern affected her marriage and was considering career changes that aligned better with her actual interests rather than Dad's expectations. The financial restructuring had been difficult but ultimately freeing, forcing her to distinguish between wants and needs in ways that clarified her values. Our financial entanglements had been substantially untangled. I'd removed myself from all family loans except a portion of Mom's medical expenses, which we'd restructured with clear terms and payment schedules. Dad had refinanced his business loan independently, accepting the higher interest rate as the cost of financial autonomy. Stephanie and her husband had downsized to a home they could afford without my co-signature, discovering they preferred the smaller space and reduced financial pressure. The process wasn't without pain. Dad's business faced tighter margins with the refinanced loan terms, and Stephanie's family had adjusted to a less affluent lifestyle. But these challenges had forced honest conversations about priorities and values that might never have happened otherwise. My own journey continued daily. Breaking lifelong people-pleasing habits required constant vigilance and occasional course correction. I declined family requests that crossed my boundaries, then spent hours fighting guilt and second-guessing. My therapist helped me recognize these reactions as normal responses to changing entrenched patterns, not signs I should revert to old behaviors. Setting boundaries didn't come naturally after decades of accommodation, but each small victory reinforced my resolve. When Dad called asking for investment advice, I provided information without automatically offering financial support. When Mom complained about Dad's behavior, I listened compassionately but redirected her to address the issues directly with him, rather than using me as an intermediary. When Stephanie suggested I co-sign her son's college loan, I declined while offering to help research scholarship options instead. The most profound change occurred in my relationship with Ethan. Our brotherhood, previously defined by my protective role and his position as the family underdog, had evolved into a balanced friendship between equals. His growing artistic success and my emotional growth had created space for mutual support rather than one-sided assistance. We spoke almost daily, sharing both triumphs and setbacks with a candor that would have been impossible within our previous family dynamic. Ethan's career continued flourishing, with gallery representation, commissioned works, and teaching opportunities providing stable income and creative fulfillment. Dad's grudging acknowledgement of his success had healed some childhood wounds, though Ethan wisely recognized external validation couldn't replace self-worth. He'd begun mentoring younger artists, breaking the cycle of criticism he'd experienced by offering the supportive guidance he'd lacked. As we finished Thanksgiving dinner, Dad surprised everyone by raising his glass in an uncharacteristic toast to Johnny and Ethan for having the courage to demand better from this family. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The moment wasn't perfect. Dad's wording suggested he still didn't fully understand his role in the dysfunction, but it represented genuine progress I'd never thought possible 6 months earlier. Later that evening, as the last guests departed, Ethan lingered to help clean up. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, loading the dishwasher. "Taking that stand after Dad's message? It could have gone very differently." I considered the question seriously. "No," I finally answered. "Even if they'd never spoken to us again, it would still have been the right decision. You can't build healthy relationships on financial manipulation and emotional control." "The family banking system," Ethan said with a wry smile, referencing our private joke about my former role. "Exactly. I needed to close that particular branch for my own well-being," I replied, matching his tone. "But I'm grateful it led to growth rather than permanent estrangement." As I reflected on our journey, certain truths crystallized that might help others facing similar family dynamics. Standing up to toxic family patterns requires tremendous courage, but offers freedom that compliance never can. The initial confrontation feels terrifying, but the alternative, remaining trapped in dysfunctional patterns indefinitely, is ultimately more damaging. There's a profound difference between helping family and enabling dysfunction. True support empowers others to grow, while enabling prevents necessary consequences that might inspire change. Learning to distinguish between these actions transformed my understanding of family obligation. Authentic love includes healthy boundaries. Despite conventional wisdom suggesting that family loyalty means unlimited tolerance, genuine love requires mutual respect and reasonable limits. Boundaries aren't walls to keep others out, but guidelines for how we'll allow ourselves to be treated. Financial entanglements often mask or complicate emotional relationships. When money and love become intertwined, both are corrupted. Separating them allows clearer understanding of genuine connections versus transactional interactions. Real peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice and truth. The superficial harmony I'd maintained through constant compromise wasn't true peace. It was suppression that allowed dysfunction to flourish. Authentic peace emerged only after painful but necessary confrontation. Sometimes what feels like breaking your family might actually be starting to heal it. The explosive confrontation that seemed catastrophic ultimately created space for genuine growth that polite avoidance never could have achieved. Have you ever had to stand up to toxic family dynamics? What boundaries did you need to set to protect yourself while still leaving room for relationship repair? Share your experiences. In the comments below, your story might help someone else find the courage to make necessary changes in their own family relationships. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding authentic connections. Remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's often the first step toward healthier relationships for everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my journey from financial hostage to emotional freedom. I wish you courage in your own path toward authentic family connections built on mutual respect rather than obligation or control.